Welcome to the tutorial on preparing for expert interviews. This tutorial will discuss what makes interviews with experts different from interviews with lay people, as well as how you can prepare yourself to interview experts. The first thing you need to prepare is the reason why you are interviewing the expert. Is your interview meant to help you discover new information and learn about a subject, or is your interview meant to help add to information you already know, which is called a recovery interview? It's important to make the distinction between these two types of interviews so that you can properly prepare for the discussion with your expert. If you don't know the purpose of the interview, then your conversation will not have a clear direction, will not be as helpful as it could be, and will probably confuse your expert. When you are deciding whether your interview will be for discovery or recovery purposes, consider what would be most beneficial for your readers. In particular, ask yourself, who exactly is your audience? What knowledge does this audience already have about the subject matter? What does your audience need to be informed about? What will your audience care about in regard to this story? And how can the expert motivate people to care about or focus on that aspect of the story? And what do you need to know in order to be able to write an accurate and informative article? Once you have determined the purpose of your interview, you'll be able to figure out who you should interview as your expert source. Once you contact that person to request the meeting, be sure to set up a convenient day, time, and length for the interview so that you know how long of an interview to prepare for and so that you know when to be prepared for the interview by. Also, determine the best way to conduct the interview. Will it take place in person, or will you have to conduct it over the phone or even via email? On another note, ask the interviewee if you can record the interview, either for your own note-taking purposes or for the purposes of putting the recording in your publication. Additionally, make sure you establish a convenient and quiet place for the interview. Even if you are only conducting the interview via phone or an online chat session like Google Hangouts or Skype, you still need to have a quiet background so that you can hear the interviewee accurately and present a professional image to him. Of course, if you're conducting the interview in person, then you need to determine a convenient but quiet location to conduct the interview. Choosing a location that will allow the interviewee to focus and to conveniently meet with you will entice him to give you the interview, since people don't like going out of their way to be interviewed. You will also want to prepare the expert for the interview by letting him know what the general subject matter is that you want to discuss. That way he can make sure he is as prepared as possible for the interview and he can bring you some helpful resources when he meets with you. Once your interview is set up, then it's time to get to work preparing for it. The first thing you will want to do is research the expert's history. Look into his career, such as what he's accomplished, where he has worked, what he has published or been interviewed about in the past, etc. Also, look into his other professional and personal experiences to determine what perspective he may bring to the interview or what connections you can make with him. Researching the expert's interests and biases will be helpful for you too. That way, you will know what questions to ask, what questions to avoid, what situations the expert might not be objective on that would cause you to have gaps in your research, what connections you two may have in common, and other helpful information that will give your interview context. Luckily, all of this information can easily be researched online by looking at the expert's websites, publications, social media accounts, and other similar sources. Naturally, you'll also need to research the subject matter that your interview focuses on. However, this needs to be done in much more detail when you're interviewing an expert than it does when you're interviewing a layperson. You do not want to waste the expert's time by asking basic questions that a simple internet search would have given you the answer to. Instead, you want to spend the valuable time you have with the expert asking insightful questions that rely on the expert's experience, stories, and predictions. You can also use the expert to gain clarity on extremely complicated topics or on contradicting opinions in the field. But in order to do that, you will have to first research all the details on the subject so that you know what the varying opinions, contradictions, and basic concepts are. As with any interview you are preparing for, you have to prepare questions you want to ask your expert. In particular, you should prepare open-ended questions that will get your expert to talk freely and really explain his thoughts. That way, you can present a lot of information to your readers since your expert will have told you a lot of information in answering your questions. Each question you prepare should have a specific purpose, such as confirming that your research is correct if there was something you were unsure about, explaining the research that you did not understand, getting insightful predictions about what may happen in the near future, getting answers to hypothetical examples so that you can present your readers with a broad range of potential outcomes for a situation, or getting additional sources of information or even connections for more interviews. Once you have all of your questions outlined, it's time to put them in the order you want to ask them. Make sure that the order you create is logical and allows each idea to build off the idea discussed in the previous question. You will also want to review all of your questions to ensure you're wording them as clearly as possible and asking about specific details that will help educate both you and your readers. You can even prepare the follow-up questions you want to ask if you've done your research and can anticipate the expert's answers to your initial questions. Finally, make sure you know your research extraordinarily well so that you can really have a conversation about it with your expert. That way, you'll be able to ask intelligent and insightful follow-up questions of your expert no matter where the conversation leads. You also need to be prepared to both take notes and record the interview, which will require you to go into the interview with some pens, paper, and at least one method of recording, whether that's via video recording or via audio recording. To be fully prepared, ensure you have backup batteries for your recording device, backup memory cards, etc. Also, test the equipment before leaving for the interview to ensure it's working properly. With time and practice, you'll get used to researching experts and preparing to interview expert sources. It'll simply become an automatic part of your journalistic process. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck preparing for your interviews with experts.